in Ranger School, for example, it's the winter. We're in North Georgia. It's -5. We just walked up this big hill. I think we were almost done. The guy next to me had passed his patrols, which is what you have to do to go to the next phase. But he had rubberneck, which is when the back of your neck gives out and your head, you can't pick your head up. And so he's completed this whole phase with rubberneck. He passed his patrol. He's sitting next to me. He's like, dude, I can't take it anymore. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, dude, you're done. Like, the next phase is easy.
The fact that there's a known thing that happens that's called rubberneck, where the muscles at the back of your neck say F it and stop working.
Yeah.
And that's just like a thing that happens is...
Yeah, it's wild. You see guys...
This is all like the resets of perspective that I think
you
is
guys,
so helpful.
Yeah. You see like a group of guys walking around like candy canes and you're just like, huh.
Welcome to the Growth Mavericks podcast, where we know that entrepreneurship isn't just about strategy. It's about stamina. It's about disrupting your default and getting comfortable being uncomfortable so you don't burn out before you break through. I'm your host, Adam Callanan. Let's get to work. Our guest today is Loren Bell. Loren spent 20 years in special operations in the U.S. military, in the Air Force, in and alongside the most elite fighting units in the history of mankind, some of which you may have heard of, many of which we civilians will never, ever hear of. Loren came out of that experience, retired about 1.5 or 2 years ago, with a particular set of skills that actually make him really good at being an entrepreneur. Going through the things that the men and women that operate at that level deal with, the duress and the ups and downs and the dealing with and mitigating risk. And I'm not talking like lose money risk that we deal with in entrepreneurship, real risk like you die or lose a limb. When they exit that and come into civilian, it is just an amazing translation to being able to deal with the required durability in operating businesses and whatnot. So it's a really, really exciting, enjoyable conversation. I'm really happy to share. Please enjoy this conversation with my friend, Loren Bell. You ready? Let's go.
Not really. Well, let's do it.
You're not really ready?
I mean, I don't like talk about myself, so.
Well, neither do I. Welcome to the club. So let's start with how we know each other, where you come from. And I don't mean physically, like what have you been doing for the last 20 years?
Yeah. So
high level, we'll get into details. I also think we should probably establish a safe word.
No, I'll be good. I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Plus I'm editing it, so I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to try to avoid having to cut like big chunks out. So if we go into territory and you need to say pineapple, just say pineapple.
Okay. That's it.
Okay. Sweet. So yeah, how did we meet?
So we met at Big Sky Bravery. I was a recipient. You were a volunteer. It was actually something I wasn't even planning on doing. I was at the tail end of my career and somebody had suggested me to do it. And I was kind of, no, those things aren't for me. I don't really want to do those volunteers or those charity things and those kind of things.
So for context, for the listener who doesn't yet know what Big Sky Bravery is, Big Sky Bravery is an organization here in Montana that we take active duty special operations, men and women, out into the Montana wilderness for a week or 5 nights of just sort of like decompression. You get to, meet civilians that you don't normally have access to, but these are all active duty people working in special operations. So it's generally in between deployments and whatnot. So you were on one of those, we call them task forces. So you came out on a task force as a recipient.
Right.
You were at the tail end of your career. I mean, you had like a year left.
Around a year left. So I had about 18 months or so. And like I said, I wasn't one of those people that really volunteered to go to those things because I was really focused on work and what I would miss out on because, it's a week out on all these things. So
did you get told to go? I know that does happen sometimes, or was it really just more like an opportunity came up?
It was more like an opportunity. I had some gray space in my calendar and I decided I was like, you know what, let's go out and go ski and play around in the snow. So, yeah, I'm glad I did. So that's how we met. We met at the airport and then on the bus, we started talking and he kind of were wondering like what I was going to do next. And I didn't really know what I was going to do next. I had definitely had some thoughts on what I might want to do next. And I think we talked about that. And you're like, I don't know if you're going to like that. And it was more like investment banking and going down that road. So he talked me into doing a startup. And
there's a couple of things happened in between the first 7 minutes of meeting and getting to that point. But let's back up. How did you get, where are you from? Obviously, I know the answer to some of these questions, but I'm asking them anyways for the sake of context.
Yeah. I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I spent about 17 years there. And then once my parents got divorced, my mom went to Colorado and my dad went to Florida. So I went out to Colorado with my mom for about a year, tried my hand at culinary art school, didn't work out. And then from there, I joined the Air Force, which was another story in itself.
I mean, no, I know we're going to double click into that, because culinary arts school to 20 years of special operations is quite a shift. So what happened?
I realized quickly that I liked being on a team. I played sports when I was growing up, football, track, those kind of things. And the people are great people, but the students there, they are really, it's a really individual thing, right? It's not, there's no teamwork. You're doing everything for yourself. So I kind of missed that dynamic. And also the people, it just wasn't my tribe. I kind of figured that out pretty quickly. And I kind of wondered what I was going to do next. So I'd always thought about joining the military. My mom did a short stint in the Air Force. My grandfather was in the Korean War. I had an uncle in Vietnam. So we didn't have a long lineage of military service, but we had some, sporadic things going, sporadic people joining different times in history. So I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. So, I was thinking, I was like, well, I definitely don't want to go to the Marines. I definitely don't want to go to the Army. But inevitably, when you show up to the recruiting station, those guys jump on you quick. So the Marines talked to me first. And the guy wouldn't leave me alone, I gave him my phone number. I told him what I wanted to do, which I didn't know what I wanted to do. So he kind of tried to guide me into certain things. And he's like, well, you can leave in like a week. You can leave in a month. What do you want? And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to do it that fast. So this went on for about 2 or 3 months and he just wouldn't leave me alone. So finally I said, I'm not interested. And then I eventually made my way to the Air Force recruiter. And even then I didn't know what I wanted to do. So, the recruiter's like, let's take your ASVAB and see where you score and whatnot. So,
what's your ASVAB? Define that just for the
It's
listener.
an aptitude test that you take to get into the military. It places you in, and sees it really places you in what job you are qualified to do based on the scores.
And you do that before you go in, or is that part of the entry process?
Before you go in, and sometimes you take it in high school. I think I took it in my junior or senior year as well.
Really?
But they wanted me to rescore since I'd been out. I graduated already. So yeah, so I took the ASVAB. I did pretty well. So the guy was like, well, what do we need? So he stuck me in like missile and space systems or something. And once I started digging in, the bases were North Dakota and I don't know, Montana. And at that point, I'm like, I don't definitely want to go there. So
yeah, Montana's the worst.
Yeah, little did I know. But so So I said, okay, I'll do that job just to get going. And I shipped out pretty soon thereafter. So I was about 18 going on 19 when all that happened. So once I got once I got to basic training, I wasn't sure I wanted to do that job. So there's some recruiters that came around and said, hey, we have some special jobs. You have to take a PT test, which is a physical training test, and see where you score on that. And then based on that, we get the ball rolling and try to get you into some other careers. And the funny part about that story is that going through basic training, you get an initial issue, which is like, you're getting your uniforms, you're getting your PT clothes and all these things. Well, I think I wore a 10 at the time or 10 and a half, and they ended up giving me a half size smaller in running shoes. So this whole time I'm trudging around in these small running shoes and my Achilles is not feeling well. And by the time I took this test, it was really inflamed. So I was a great runner, and then I failed the run on this physical training aptitude test. And luckily the recruiter saw something in me because I passed the push-ups, the sit-ups, I think the pull-ups and some other things. And he's like, I could tell that you're a runner, but you did terrible on the run. I was like, well, man, I got these small shoes on. And he's like, do you think you can pass? I'm like, I know I can run 1.5 miles or 2 miles, whatever it was, in this certain time. He goes, okay, I'll give you a pass this time. So I was like, oh, he's like, you're in. I'm like, okay. He's like, he's like, you got to prove me right. I was like, okay, I'm good. So that's what happened. And that guy gave me a chance. And then from there, I graduated basic training and then went into the Tactical Air Control Party, that was my job in the Air Force. So got to the training there, and that was another rude of awakening. So
maybe a year and a half ago, you were in Montana here in Bozeman with me, and we went out on a leisurely hike that turned into a 14-mile round tripper up to an Arctic lake. It was epic, but it just longer than we thought it was going to.
Right.
We basically like stumbled back to the house straight to dinner, exhausted. But on that trip, we were chatting through the woods, and you told me a story about a point at which you were maybe thinking that this was the wrong decision.
Yeah, that was when we first showed up to the schoolhouse from basic training. You go right into it. And the first night, they come screaming and yelling at 3 a.m. You don't know what's what. They're telling you to get outside, and they're telling you to grab all these things, and you don't have enough time, and people are yelling at you. And that from 3 a.m. until probably 9 a.m., you're just doing exercises. You're running down to the water. You're getting sandy. You're running back. All these different things. They're spraying you with hoses, and what they're trying to do is weed people out that to quit. So and they did, and people were quitting all around me, and the pain finally ended around breakfast time, and I think that was probably around 8 or 9. And you have 5 minutes, go take a shower and all these things, and then you eat breakfast, and then the day continues on, and the day ended probably around 7 p.m., maybe 8 p.m. I think, and then then I think they woke us up again. But in between that time, I called home. My stepfather, he spent about 30 years in the Army, so I call home. I'm in tears. I'm like, Mom, I don't know what I did. I think I did. I think I picked the wrong job. And I talked to Frank, my stepdad, and he gave me some advice. He said, hey, the only thing you can control is your effort and your attitude. So you pick that. So it's up to you to stay. And so I stayed, just keeping that in the back of my mind the whole time. Effort and attitude. The only thing I can control. And that's what pretty much got me through it, because at that point I was like, it was a culture shock. It was a lot of shocks, and at that point in time, it was probably the hardest thing I've done. So yeah, that's kind of,
it's that, I mean, massive. We've talked about this since then, like that massively resonated with me. And it's something that I use with my kids a lot. I think being able to, a child or adult alike, being able to appreciate that most things are out of control. The only things you really control are the way that you perceive them and what you do about them.
Absolutely.
And outside of that, yeah. So that's something to put a pin in, because that is, I think, incredibly valuable in any world, certainly well outside of the military.
Yeah, and I definitely carried that forward in anything I did, So that's a good piece of advice.
So from there, you went into like TAC school. Like there's some staff. Did you have to go through selection for that?
It kind of was included in that at that point. This was in 2003. So all the selections up to that didn't really exist. They were just kind of weeding you out through the everyday training. So that lasted for, I want to say 6 to 8 months, something like that.
Explain what a TAC does.
So a TAC controls airstrikes in a tactical situation. In aviation, they're controlling with either the conventional or SOF or special operations forces. And at that point, and what's really unique about a TAC is they start with conventional forces, and then you have to go through selections to get your way to being a special operator. So I think today they're actually classified as Air Force Special Warfare. So they're already pushed that way, but you still have to start with conventional forces. And really you're aligned with those forces to advise, assist, and control a tactical aircraft and run any drop zone.
So when you do that, you're doing that with non-Air Force units. Like you're being embedded in other ground force tactical units.
Right. You're always, there are some instances later on down the road where we did some unilateral things, but most of the time you're attached to, could be the Army, the Navy, and the Marines. It just depends on where you are, but historically it's conventional Army units. And you're there to tell the commander, like, hey, we can do this, we can do that. I really advise him what to do in sticky situations, but could also be in a command center telling him to do things, which, most young guys are like, I don't want to work at the command center. So, but that's actually where I started out. My first rotation. Well, so I graduated TAC schoolhouse, and then I got stationed in Fort Drum, New York, which is upstate, super cold, great place. Canada was nearby, so that helped. But I got stationed there, and oddly enough, the guys there had just come back from the invasion of Iraq. So, we had all this experience, and my first supervisor got a Silver Star. So, I walk into his office, and he's got, he's sitting at the desk, Silver Star behind him. So I'm super intimidated, and he's like, do you know why the fuck you're here? And I'm like, Roger, Sergeant. And then, he scares the shit out of me. He tells me, gives me his expectations, and then sends me down the road and says, hey, go over there with the rest of the new guys and go learn. So that's what I did. I would say those were very formative years for me because, like I said, I had great mentors. I had great supervisors, team leaders that had a lot of combat experience. And then, we still had a guy from Vietnam at the unit. Like, it was, he had placated himself to not get promoted, and he was maybe, an E7 or something. And he was at the tail end. He'd been in 35 years or something crazy. He got a bunch of waivers. But yeah, so he'd been in for a while. And so from there, I did my first rotation in Iraq in 2005. And the way that the tactical career field used to be, I'm not sure if it is now, but you started off and you were kind of an apprentice. So you're learning. So on-the-job training was me deploying to Iraq, going to a command center, going out to patrol bases. And really, you are just helping the senior man organize maps, set radios, all these different things. And depending on how that guy is, that's what you're going to learn, and that's how you're going to move forward. So luckily I had great, which they're called JTACs, Joint Terminal Attack Controller. So you're attached to one of those guys and you're doing all of his admin stuff, really setting his radios, like I said. And luckily I got attached to a good one. And he taught me a lot. We had a pretty good rotation. It was 2005 and I was in Abu Ghraib. My room was in a old cell, like at the prison. It was like an ice box. That was crazy. And at that time, I worked for. It was actually the former Secretary of Defense, Mark Milley, was the commander there. So the JTAC and I worked for him directly, which was interesting. He was an interesting. Obviously, made his way up to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That was good. Did that rotation, came back, and then there's a point there where you have to transition to, somebody has to recommend you to be a JTAC. So at first you're not a JTAC. You have to go through the school, you have to go through the training, and then you have to get upgraded to do that. And at this point in time, I'm about 20 years old. I get back, and the guy I was with recommended me to go through the program to be upgraded. And I did. I went to Vegas for 5 weeks underage, which was fun. Luckily, I was underage. I probably wouldn't have graduated. So I went there, did all that. I was probably one of the youngest guys that had been through the schoolhouse in a long time. So everybody was picking on me and like giving me the worst scenarios, thinking I'm not going to pass them and all these things. And luckily, with a lot of studying, I made it through. I got back to Fort Drum, and then you have to do another probably 6 months of training to be upgraded and to be able to get an evaluation to make you into a JTAC. So I got that evaluation, passed, and then my next rotation, I was in charge of a young guy at, I think I was 21 at that point. So I had another young guy attached to me, and we did our first rotation in Afghanistan in 2006 or 7, which at that point, like, the rules were pretty loose still. There was not very many people there. And me being young, I just volunteered for anything. It was like, I don't want to sit in the command center. I want to go out and do things. And the commander there realized that, and he would just send me out to wherever they needed a JTAC, and I would take my younger guy with me, and we would just do that.
So in piece of reference material, going through the Big Sky Bravery, there's a book that they make you read as part of the sort of their version of a selection process, which probably looks a lot different than yours, but it's called Alone at Dawn. It's about John Chapman, who was in your unit was he there at the same time? Or was he before you?
He was way before me. That happened.
Okay. I don't know what the timelines were on that.
That happened in 2001 or 2.
Okay. So John was in the Air Force. And again, these are all to the civilian are all things that you're never going to hear about ever. So he was a combat controller. And the difference between, from my understanding, between a JTAC and a combat controller is they are also can control the skies, can divert commercial traffic, right?
Right. Yeah. They're tower rated. So they're like an air traffic controller, but they do it in austere locations, and they're also tower rated. So they have that going for them. And then historically, that's what they did. They weren't JTACs before the global war on terror. I think maybe like 20 to 30% of them were. And then after that, there was a shortage of JTACs, and then they started pushing them through. So then my primary role was to be a JTAC, and that was kind of their secondary role.
So one of the things in that book that really stood out to me as an ignorant civilian was the fact that you had to, assuming that given the delta between JTAC and a combat controller is really like the air traffic controller component to it. A business is like an engine. It needs fuel to run. For consumer brands and pretty much every company on the planet, that fuel is profit. Without it, growth stalls and everything feels harder than it should be. Pentane helps you fine-tune your business and advertising so you're running at peak performance, showing you exactly what's driving your margins, your cash flow, and pricing power. No more wasted time in spreadsheets or guessing what's working, waiting until you get your P&L next month to see if it's good or bad. Just the clarity and direction you need to grow faster, smarter, and with less stress. So if you're running a consumer brand, go to pentane.com and fuel your growth today. That you had to be qualified and capable of operating with all of the SF, all of DevGru. And so we're talking about like Delta, Green Berets, SEAL Team 6. You had to be able to operate alongside those people. So you had to qualify to do all of the things that those hyper specialized groups had to do. You had to be able to do.
Right. That's later on down the line. Fast forward, I did about 4 rotations at Fort Drum, and then I volunteered to go to the Rangers, and that's where the first selection in my life began, really, I think. And at that point there was no selection to go from the conventional side into the Rangers. It was more of a paperwork, kind of like a good old boy system. But, because the career field's so small that they could just call somebody and ask, like, hey, is he a good dude? How are his skills? And so on and so on. And there's a long story how I got to meet other people and I got involved there. But eventually I put in my packet, which I'm pretty sure was a paper packet that I mailed in. Maybe I emailed it, I'm not sure. And I didn't hear anything back. And there's no, nobody notified me or anything. So I was at a training event, and some guys from the special operations side of the TACP career field were there. And one of them came up to me and said, "Hey man, congratulations, you're part of the unit." And I said, "Oh, great, awesome." So he's like, "You should get your orders here soon." And I was like, "Okay." And so I got orders, which gives you kind of gives you the movement to go to the next place. So I got my orders, and before I got those orders, I had a conversation with the superintendent of the unit, and he said, "Hey, where do you want to go? You can go over and be with the Green Berets, or you can go over with the Rangers." And he said, "Based on what I know about you, you should go with the Rangers." And I was like, "Okay, great. I don't know anything about anything, so I'll go with the Rangers." So I show up to Fort Benning, assigned to the 3rd Battalion, 75th Rangers. Again, I was the 23, youngest guy there. Everybody there is probably in their 30s. And they're looking at me. I mean, like, I was always one to have the most starched uniform, the most shiniest boots. And I'm going to beat you in anything physical. Like, I'm going to outrun you. I'm going to do anything. I'm going to come in first. So that's my mentality. That's what I showed up with. And these guys are just looking at me, and they're just like, "This guy's in for it," So they really they welcomed me with open arms, and a lot of a scenario based training around the building on my first day. So that was good. So from there, that's kind of when they were kind of switching into more professional selection process to go to that unit. So they realized that, like, hey, I'm probably a good Delta or a good barrier or good baseline of what they want. So from there, like, hey, go, you build the selection. So me and 2 other guys, we kind of built the selection process, and then I had to run through it to give the baseline scores, which some people were probably upset about because I was really fast at the time. So so some of those things they changed, but it was fun. And based on that, they were like, "Okay, hey, you're good, man. Like, now you go into the training." So from there, I went and I aligned with ACO of 3rd Bat, and really just rolled into their training. So that's where I really, like, they take you as a stranger, they drop you into a company which has 100 dudes and say, "Hey man, work with these guys," and then you got to fit in. So that was kind of the beginning of that. And that's where I really developed, like, this mentality of, like, this is the team I want to be on. Everybody wants to be here. Everybody's driving towards the same objective. And that kind of, like, steered me towards the rest of my career. Like, at that point, I'd probably been in for 4 years or 5 years. So I spent 3 years at ACO 375. And then from there, there's a reconnaissance side of the 75th Ranger Regiment. And there at our unit, there was about 4 or 5 guys there. And there were some stipulations that said, "Hey, you have to go through Ranger School. You have to do a couple other things to go." And at that point, there was no selection process for that either. So the guy that was in charge was like, well, hey, these guys going to the reconnaissance company have to go through selection, so why don't we just go with them? And so they talked that out with the regiment, and they said, okay, yeah. So I volunteered to go to Ranger School. That was interesting. And from there, I went to pre-Ranger School. So there's, I think it's a month-long program where you have to go through, and they kind of teach you everything that you're going to learn in Ranger School, so that they build you up and, kind of so you can be successful and pass Ranger School, because that's the objective. So I did that. And the regiment's pre-Ranger School was pretty difficult, but I met some great guys there, and there was guys from my company there, so it kind of worked out well for me. And I went with another TAC-P, so passed that. And then once that's done, you go from there. You have a day off, and then that's 1 month, and then you go into Ranger School like on the next Sunday or something. So you have like a day off to go and get all your things like regrouped and go eat real food and shave your head again and then go back. So I did that. The first time the first phase, I did not pass. So I got recycled, which that's a whole nother mental thing, because that's depending on when you get recycled, you could be there painting rocks for 7 weeks, or you could go, like, it just depends on the timing. So that was the time because there's a best ranger competition, and that was the time I hit. So it was like, hey, you got to stay here and paint rocks for 7 weeks. And and my old team is going to be deployed. So I'm like, man, I'm sitting here painting rocks and these guys are gone. So my old team leader calls the Ranger School, recalls me so I can go deploy. And I come back from that rotation, and then I go right back to Ranger School. And then now it's the winter, which is awful. And then I go straight through and graduate in 2010.
How do you deal with, like, obviously I know there's a lot of specifics in the process that we can't really get into, but how do you deal with, I mean, these things are like intensely mentally, physically grueling, and they go for a long time. So obviously, later on, we're going to tie this all back into a bow around entrepreneurship, but yeah. How do you deal with, we may not even be to like the real hard stuff yet, but how did you deal or set yourself up to deal with that outside of the, that controlling your effort and whatnot we talked about earlier? Yeah.
Yeah. I learned early on that physical fitness, if you're the most physical fit in that career field or in the military or anything that you're going to do, it carries you a long way, because your mental capacity is also going to go with that, right? So doing those like hard physical things also takes a hardened mentality to do them. So I don't think I'm ever satisfied. So I'm always looking for what's next. If it's harder, I want to do it. If it's, like I would run, 10 miles after work every day, or, I got into cycling and I would ride like 30 or 40 miles a day and ride to work. And then on the weekends, I would do like century rides and all these things. So I don't know why I gravitated towards that. It just, when I'm doing those things, it can turn off my mind and I just keep going. And also I can see the end. I know what's there has to be an objective, and I want to meet that objective. So for me, I think that's always it. It's like that carrot. Like I always want to try to get to that carrot, right?
Did they provide you with, at any point through the process, did they provide you with training on that? Or is there just an expectation that you develop and have that on your?
I think it's kind of ingrained from the beginning, like never quit, right? And you can see guys quitting. And if you have conversations with them, you're like, man, why'd you quit? We're almost done. And like, I just couldn't take it anymore. And for me, that has never been in my mentality. I'm like, we're almost there. In Ranger School, for example, it's the winter. We're in North Georgia. It's -5. We just walked up this big hill. I think we're almost done. The guy next to me had passed his patrols, which is what you have to do to go to the next phase. But he had rubberneck, which is when the back of your neck gives out and your head, you can't pick your head up. And so he's completed this whole phase with rubberneck. He passed his patrol. He's sitting next to me. He's like, dude, I can't take it anymore. I'm like, you just passed. We're about to go to Florida, like in the sunshine, and like, you'll be fine. We're going to go eat treats after this and all these things. You eat a buffet of candy and stuff after you're done each phase. And he just quit. And I'm like, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, dude, you're done. Like the next phase is easy. So I've never had that mentality. And I I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's from how I grew up or just based on what I learned in the military, but I've always been that way of just like, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to finish. Maybe I'm just too dumb to quit. That might be it too.
The fact that there's like a known thing that happens that's called rubberneck, where the muscles in the back of your neck say F it and stop working.
Yeah.
And that's just like a thing that happens is.
Yeah, it's wild. This
is all like the resets of perspective that I think
you guys, yeah, you see like a group of guys walking around like candy canes and you're just like, I did not want that to happen to me.
That sounds terrible.
And you're cold. I mean, the conditions were not good for them. I mean, it was -5 and it was, you have the worst equipment possible.
Sure.
With the least amount of food and the least amount of sleep. And like, it took a toll on him and he quit. And yeah, I was very surprised. But that I guess, that's kind of been my guiding light of like, hey, what's next? Like, and, when I graduated Ranger School and I went to the reconnaissance company, I kind of missed the part of their selection. So they're like, hey, go do this patrol in Wales with the team that I never met before. It's like 6 guys. And I'm like, what patrol? What is this? And it's called the Cambrian Patrol. And it's through the Brecons Beacons of Wales. You show up, you don't have, I think we use the Brits equipment, which is not good. And you move 50K and you have, I think, 20 or 30 hours with weight through the Brecons Beacons to complete this patrol. You have to go swim a alpine lake and all these different things.
Is it a contest or is it like they're actually patrolling for something?
It's a competition. It's a worldwide competition. So you'll have, SOF guys from Norway and Germany and everywhere, a lot of NATO guys. And so I joined this team. We went over and like, all right, let's do it. And we did it. And I mean, for example, one of the guys on my team he was walking with an IV because he had pneumonia. So to finish this thing, like that's just the way these guys are. So, like, how am I to quit when this guy's walking with an IV and he has pneumonia? So we finished that. I think we came in second. We got beat by the Packies, surprisingly enough, but they have British officers, so I'll give them that. But they knew what was going on. We did not. And then the guys there were from the reconnaissance company. They were like, oh, this guy's, you're in. Like, that was it. So like, I didn't quit. I just stuck with these guys and they're like, okay, you're good. So I was there for a few years and then I'm like, okay, what's next? Like there has to be something else. And at that point in time, I think there was only 2 or 3 TAC-Ps at the next level. And that next level would be at a special mission unit. Like you're talking, a Delta or SEAL Team 6. And so I was like, well, how do I get there? I want to do that. I got in contact with the guys there, talked through the process. And then I went to a selection in 2012, showed up there, had no idea what I was in for. I was just like, all right, let's do it. Cause like I said, there's only 2 or 3 guys that had done it before. And yeah, I passed selection and then went through OTC 2013.
OTC.
Operator training course. So that's where you, like you're trying to explain earlier, that's how you learn those skills to be, aligned or attached, or if you're doing something on your own with those guys. Yeah.
Got it. And then, so you go do that. And then at some point you move off into kind of a non-existent unit, doing non-existent things in other places around the world.
Right. Yeah. So I did the tactical stuff for a couple of years. And then from there, I moved into more of a sensitive activities unit. And I spent 8 years there. And that's where I retired out of.
So
and that was another selection as well.
Okay. Yeah, I won't push on that. Or you'll be saying pineapple a lot.
Yeah. No, that selection's not, well, I guess it is a little bit physical, but it's more a mental challenge of.
Yeah, I'm sure. So then we get to 2000 and was it 22 that we met? Yeah, it was in the fall of 22. Or I guess January of 22. It was on a winter task force.
Yeah.
We've done 2 of them together because you were there for that summer one, the
summer one. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. For context for the listener, when you get to the end of your military career like that, at 20 years, retirement with full benefits, right? And the military will effectively pay for the last 6 months of that. You can go and do an internship.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a couple of programs that do it. The one that we did was SkillBridge.
Right. SkillBridge. Right.
Yeah. So we on that task force in January, you were back to the very beginning of this, like you were talking about the internships and things that you have access to through that are great jobs for most people. It's like that. It's, analyst at an investment bank, it's analyst or, operate some operational position at JP Morgan. But that to me as a business operator, entrepreneur, didn't seem like that was a place you were going to enjoy, given the fact that you had spent the last 20 years doing really hard things in really hard places where like risk was real, under real duress, which I immediately saw as, well, that translates perfectly to entrepreneurship.
Which I had no idea. Again, I was really discovering myself again and what I wanted to do. And more importantly, I figured out what I didn't want to do. And you kind of helped me with that. And some other programs, the Honor Foundation, 51 Vets, these different organizations that help out special operators, onto the next chapter of their life. I really used those things to figure out what I didn't want to do. And I went and toured Deloitte and McKinsey and JP Morgan, all these different things.
Yeah.
Talked to these guys and they're like, hey, associates are working 80 to 100 hours a week. And I'm like, I've already done that. I'm good. I would, if I'm going to do that, I want to do it for myself or, with somebody that I enjoy being around and not for a giant organization or a Fortune 500 companies. So that's, you definitely like helped me change my mindset of like, oh, maybe a startup is where it's at because it's chaos. I like chaos and I do well. I do well when things are dynamic and always changing. And I mean, in the military, especially where I was, you'll work on a project for 5 years and never see the fruition of it. And, you don't even know what happens because you go and move somewhere else, you hand it off. And so for me, I was like, this is perfect. But
so we're now, we're in now early March of 2025 when we're recording this. Pentane, the company launched on the back of some early success operating systems out of spreadsheets. And that was about the time that we met. Like I had just kicked off the converting all this complexity and math in spreadsheets that worked really well inside of companies. We had just kicked off converting that into a software platform. So it did take a little bit of time for you to get through the system. Like you couldn't formally start until I think July of that year.
July, correct.
From an internship standpoint through SkillBridge. And then you were also in an international MBA program, which was great. I know you got to go and see and do a lot of interesting things with a different type of people.
Yeah, it really...
And then you were used to working with at least, yeah.
Yeah, and again, it kind of goes with that pattern of dropping me into somewhere and like, yeah, I'll figure it out, especially with that MBA program, because it ran parallel with us starting Pentane. And like, you were telling me like all these financial terms and all this. I have no idea what any of this means. And then I'm getting the same thing in my MBA program is like, oh, here's corporate finance and here's this. And I'm like, oh boy, I don't know any of this stuff either. So luckily it did run parallel and I was learning both things at the same time. So it kind of transferred over. And that MBA program kind of really opened up my mind because the cohort was 39 people from 29 different countries. And there's only one other American. And they're all executives from either their own companies or these big companies in Europe because the school was out of Europe, or in Africa or in Asia. So like it was a great intro to me to business and to like what's next and what else exists. And I think it also helped me really understand what we were doing at Pentane and why it mattered. Like you did a great job of telling me why it mattered and like your perspective on things. And then I see how other people use those metrics and I go, oh, okay, this is why it matters. Helps me try to explain in Pentane to them. They're like, oh, I wish I had that. And it's like, okay, cool. I get it now.
Yeah, it isn't interesting to like see both sides because the people in your MBA class, it was limited. It was only like 10 or 15 people, right? But they were all heads of like massive companies. I mean, none of them were like startup founders.
38 people. 38.
Okay.
Yeah, there was, they're all executives, either CEOs, COOs, CTOs, whatever, from the C-suite. There were entrepreneurs in there as well. The guy that started VK in Russia, like the Russian Facebook, was in my cohort. So there are some tech startup guys.
Was he skeptical of you?
Everybody was skeptical of me because when I started the program, I was still in the Air Force. So I had to go to the security office and tell them what I was doing. And they like gave me you work for the Department of Defense and you're a senior operations manager.
Yeah.
what does that do? I don't know what that is. That sounds cool. I'll do that. So I stand up on my first day there, and they're like, oh, what sector are you from? And as soon as I said Department of Defense, I'm just looking around, and the Russians and the Chinese, they're just like, okay, all right,
That's
we're
funny.
up to, we know what you're up to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're a little accepted, but at the end of it, like, we're great friends. And even there was a Iraqi guy in my class. He's a CEO of medical company or pharmaceutical company in Baghdad. And the first day there, he's like, "Oh, where are you from?" I'm the United States, and he goes, "What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I work for the Department of Defense." And he goes, "Man, you fucked up my country." And I was like,
Sorry.
"Okay,
Yeah. Well,
all right,
nice to meet you.
yeah, you want to be friends?" And and we're friends still today.
So now, we're a year and a half past that, you've been involved in like true startup from nothing to something. And to be fair, we're just getting to the point that it's something now. I mean, we're completely rebuilt and relaunched a product a month ago. It's now gaining momentum, like literally as of yesterday. And today, like the things that we've been working on since then are starting to take off, and the snowball is beginning to build. How has that process and I don't caveat it, how has the process been for you, over the last year and a half?
We discussed this before, and it's a different risk. You take on a different risk than you did when you signed the line or you volunteer, for so many things to put your life on the line. And, you understand those risks, right? Like I could not come home. I could come home maimed or whatever. And you understand that. In the startup world, you're like, I'm going to throw it on the line and maybe I don't get anything. And you're just like, let's do that. Like, I don't know the rest. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's bad. And so for me to internalize that, it took a lot of deep introspection to say, okay, man, is this actually what you want to do? Like, do you have a solid enough foundation to do this, right? Are you durable enough to like go through this and mentally take this on? And for me, I was like, well, yeah, sure, I can do it. Let's try it. Like, I don't know. And it's highs and lows. I mean, at the beginning, I really questioned. I said, man, is this what I should be doing?
Yeah, you and me both, buddy.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, we've had some great conversations together. It's like, man, I don't know. Are we doing the right thing? Like, is this right? And especially I see my friends that are retired and they're doing something else. And not that they took the easy road, but they took a lucrative road, down, going to a defense contractor or, staying in that realm. And for me, I was like, man, I'm done with that. I want to move on and do something else. So that was a whole nother risk that I was like, I have to start at the bottom. And then we had this conversation. I said, man, I'll start at zero. I don't know anything. Like, and I'll do anything. I'll learn. I'm pretty adaptable. So definitely highs and lows. I think more so now, I can really correlate it to my time in the service. That you could build something up and then some commander can say, no, we're not doing that anymore. And it kind of correlates because we've built a lot of things and now they're in the back, right? We don't use them anymore. Like I spent a lot of time connecting a lot of things and now we don't use them anymore. And a lot of people, they would be discouraged and they go, man, like I just wasted time. And for me, I look at it as like, I didn't know how to do that before, but now I do know how to do it. So it's an experience thing. So I kind of take that mentality too, as like that learned experience. Like you can't buy experience. So if I'm doing something and maybe we don't use it, or maybe it's, we find something better, at least I tried it and I can at least talk through and kind of go through there.
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge part of startup is we're going to build a lot of stuff that we're not going to use. I mean, the goal obviously as we continue to do it is less of that happens, but you got to throw a lot of spaghetti against the wall.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think now I've graduated my MBA program. I've done a lot more research into companies. I've done a lot more research into different startups and like these different sectors. And I've really dumped the lexicon of the government or the military. And I'm like, more so my mind is always thinking that way towards business. And it's really helped me a lot because, like I said, those ups and downs, I'm like, man, I don't know, I should probably do something else. I don't know if this is for me, but I think now it's definitely for me, and I really enjoy it. And I couldn't have chosen a better path because I don't know which path I would have chosen and how they would have turned out. So I don't kind of look back on this.
Yeah, I mean the internal line of questioning around, am I doing the right thing? Is this ever going to happen? Is it ever going to work? Is completely human, and we all have it. I mean, I literally have it all the time. I am chock full of imposter syndrome all the time. And this, I mean, had done some other things that have gone pretty well. I've also done a lot of things that have been complete disasters.
Yeah.
But the part that is interesting to me is like, I have the resilience to be okay, like mentally managing those things, partly because I've done them before. So like, I have an expectation those things are going to happen now. And the other part is because of some of the hard things that I've built into my life to try to create an 1 ounce of the durability that you have from your 20 years of doing like real hard stuff under real duress with real risk. And there is obviously a difference in, you know, the financial, you could lose money risk, or, I mean, I guess if you're willing to put everything on the line, you could lose everything. But like, what does that really mean? I mean, you're not going to die.
Right.
Like the worst case scenario in this does not include death.
Right. And that's
dismemberment. So it's like, that's the part that I always have found really interesting in having people like you in my life, is it's such an amazing way to reset perspective for me.
Yeah. And like I said, it's a whole different perspective for me, because I remember we were sitting in your kitchen and we were having this conversation about the risk. And I'm like, this is a whole new risk for me. Like I don't, you know, and I really leaned on you to like, oh man, it's good. Like this is normal. Cool. I'm like, okay, got it. Let's do it.
Yeah. Are there any parting words, anything you want to have to share, anywhere where you want people to find you if you want to be found? I don't know if you want to be found or not at this point.
Parting words, really, unfortunately, you know, Frank has passed away and my mother passed away, but those words that got me through early on of those things that you can control, if you're always thinking that way, effort and attitude, anything else is easy. Like anything else, you can't control it. So, but if you're in a shitty situation, like, have a good attitude about it and put max effort, and you're going to get through it. So I guess those are my parting words. And as far as finding me, I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah, perfect. That's about the only place I spend any time too. Well, I mean, honestly, man, I know you don't love hearing this, but it goes without saying, I deeply appreciate everything that you committed to and sacrificed for. And I also deeply appreciate your willingness to go on this differently risk-filled journey with me. Your organizational structure is something that I massively lack and benefit from having you on the team.
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks.
A huge thanks to our guests today. Don't forget, this is powered by Pentane Financial and Advertising Command Center for Consumer Brands. Stop what you're doing, put your phone down, walk away from the computer screen, go outside, get some air, do something hard, push your limits, get uncomfortable, become more durable and more resilient, create the stamina required to get through those entrepreneurial barriers, stay in the game for as long as you can, and we will see you next time.